Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or the guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hi there. Welcome to the 48th episode of A Couple Takes on MS. Hi, this is Dan Digman.
And hi, this is me, Jennifer Digman.
And welcome to our show. What we're talking about today, it's We Connect. And we want to ask you the question out there in listener land, what scares you? And something that scared the hell out of us, to be quite frankly, it's not flying. It was flying with making a connecting flight. Anytime we've flown for events, we've always made sure that we had a direct flight from one place to the other because you want to avoid with a wheelchair the potential of a chair getting lost or not making it to where you're going, getting damaged, whatever. However, this last weekend, we made a trip and we had to do a connecting flight and it scared us.
Okay, and I think it's really important, Dan, that we should probably tell people, if this is the first time you've listened to A Couple Takes on MS, that I'm living with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis and no longer walk, and I'm dependent on my wheelchair. And Dan, what's your story?
Well, my story, Jennifer, is that I have relapsing remitting MS, and we actually just yesterday?
No.
2 days ago.
2 days ago.
2 days ago, celebrated our 13th anniversary.
13 years we've been married. And I think that's why our show, is A Couple Takes on MS, because we're a married couple, but we have different perspectives of life with multiple sclerosis. And while the connecting flight scared me because I wanted my wheelchair to make it on our trip, why did a connecting flight scare you?
Because if you didn't have a wheelchair, I don't know what we would do. I think that was the fear. I think you hear these horror stories of people using wheelchairs and flying and having, there's a lot that goes into getting an wheelchair on an airplane. And so there's potential, and I don't think, people just moving luggage potentially don't take as careful handling of said wheelchairs. And I think that sometimes, airlines potentially get a bad rap. One bad apple doesn't spoil a whole bunch.
No, but why is that in the human condition? That if we have a horror story, we're going to stand from the rooftops and scream it everywhere. But when you have a good experience, you're a little more quiet, and you don't say as much. But we had a really good experience.
And I agree, but then I think is that tie into A Couple Takes on MS, because that which happened to us could be construed as just the most worst evil thing in the world. And we'll get to that, but let's talk about making the connecting flight. And this is not a paid advertisement, we're just telling it like it is. I mean, we always fly Delta Airlines because we've always had good experiences with Delta in moving forward, getting the help we need. And this was just amazing. What was happening is we live in Michigan, and we were speaking at an MS event in Roanoke, south of Roanoke, Virginia. That being said, there are no direct flights from Detroit, Michigan to Roanoke. We had to do a connecting flight from Detroit to Atlanta and then back up to Roanoke. And I mean, this is what we're looking at is what were we going to do to make that connecting flight once we got to Atlanta to need to get to your wheelchair to be able to go to the bathroom, because it would be too hard to, obviously Delta has wheelchairs, but I think to make the pivot and the transfer with you would have been a challenge. And this is one of the big things. These are the tips for you in, the listener. And if you're going to make these connecting flights, always do your homework into these things and make sure the people, your airlines, your people know what your needs are. And this was a great tip we got from one of our fellow MS activists who travels with a wheelchair. If you're traveling and you need a layover for a connecting flight, always try to build in like a 2-hour gap from when you land to when you have to get onto the airplane.
And I realize that 2 hours may sound like a short period of time, but our friend Scott told us you need at least 2 hours, and thank you, Scott, because you were correct. We put the airplane, we learned at the airplane that I wanted my wheelchair when we got to Atlanta, so we put the chair on the airplane. Touchdown in Atlanta, they took off the chair, and I was able to motor around a very large airport with the help of a representative from Delta. Again, not paid advertisement, but just extreme appreciation to Delta Airlines. That's why we're mentioning it. Because someone met us at the gate when we landed in Atlanta and walked us to where our next gate for the flight to Roanoke would be. And that really helped, because if you've never flown through Atlanta, that's a huge airport. And it was very intimidating, and I think both you and I were a little concerned about how we were going to navigate that, not having been there. But because there was a representative from the airline there to help navigate, it made it a little easier. And then having my own personal electric wheelchair made the 2-hour layover a little easier to handle, and I was able to use the restroom, and we were able to get some lunch. And it wasn't as stressful and rushed as we thought it could have been. And I think that's really important. You have to do your homework. You have to arrange the flight and everything. But some of that if you're going to be a responsible traveler, you have to do your homework and you have to plan accordingly. And, Dan and I, our tips, just straight out of the gate would be to be really prepared, to pack appropriately, to not overpack, which I would say is something that, we are really conscientious about. And then, when I took my wheelchair, just a simple little thing, like I took the knob off my chair, the little rubber knob off the chair so that I wouldn't lose it. And just a little effort like that really saves you a lot, because I had the knob for my chair when we got to Roanoke, and I wasn't filing a claim with Delta.
Well, and I think that's the big thing that warmed my heart, and it's just the reality. When people, and that was the one thing that you need to ask for, is ask the people at the gate and when you're checking in what your needs are in terms of transfers. I mean, we get there, you always tell the person at the gate that you will need 2 people to help with the transfers to get you from your wheelchair to your aisle chair and then into your chair on the plane.
Right.
But when they were doing the transfer, and then I get all, my duty is to get the knob off of the wheelchair, because there's lots of stuff going on and it's easy to lose that. And the person from the airline said that's a good idea, because they don't always know or they don't always see. There was, though, when we landed in Atlanta,
Yes.
there was the person who brought the wheelchair said that he actually looked in the cargo place area because he was afraid that had fallen off. So he'd actually looked for your knob, but I had already had it. But I think that's just the care that they took for it, that it's just like that they're looking for those things. But
Right.
always do your, I guess that's the theme.
Due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, to take care of yourself, because you can't just leave things out for other people to, you can't expect everyone to know what your needs are.
Exactly. And then when you have a good experience like this, Dan and I have said many, many times that loyalty pays. When you have a good experience, like we had with Delta, that's why we will fly with Delta again. And it's, why we encourage people to, it may cost a little more money, or it may be a little more inconvenient, it may not fly at your local airport, that something like that. But if you get good service, that loyalty is important.
Whether it's Delta or United or any airline, if you have a good experience, I think then they understand, and then you understand too more of what they're looking for, and I think it just becomes a good relationship all the way around. And so we make all this and we get to where we need to go, and and I suppose then the next thing when you're talking about airline travel and stuff, it's finding ground transportation.
Yes, and that is so very important, because being in a wheelchair, it can be difficult to find accessible taxi cabs. Or, if you're traveling in a larger city, Dan and I, again, not a paid endorsement, but we've been very fortunate and been very thankful for the yellow cab, and just, have we used any other?
Yellow cab, super shuttle.
Super shuttle, that they've had accessible cabs.
Yeah, it's like, don't do the flying and then think you're going to show up at an airport, even a big city,
Right.
that they will have an accessible van to transport you if you're flying with a wheelchair. And so we had done the searching, and a good resource is to talk to the state or the local MS chapter or MS Society representatives to find out, because they probably have a list, and that's what we got, because they deal with getting transportation like this fairly often, or at least have that as a resource to use that to find out. And that's how we found this transportation with Roanoke. Yeah, I mean, but down in Roanoke, I mean, just to find that transportation, because actually where we were speaking was about an hour south of Roanoke, so we had to go, wind through the mountains and things. It was absolutely gorgeous, but you're just like, my gosh, how do you find your way in this place?
Yes, and thank goodness we had a really good cab driver, if you want to call it a cab, an accessible transport driver named Tammy, and she was amazing, and she took us to where we were speaking and then back to the airport. And that, that is really important to have. And it's not like Dan and I haven't developed relationships with people that have driven us places, because quite typically, if you're using an accessible transport, you will have the same driver for a number of journeys on your vacation. So it's important to be appreciative and to try and be as accommodating to that person who is helping to make your trip special and functional.
And this is something that now this is where the trip got
a little off course.
A little off course. So we and I'll just take a moment to let me go all Governor Snyder on this, but give a big shout out to everybody at the conference we had spoken at. I mean, presented on caregiving tips to help people move forward and strengthen their relationships as caregivers and care receivers and within their family and everything. So thanks to everybody down in Virginia who truly made our trip worthwhile, and just feeling so appreciative to everybody there. But with that, so we spoke at the event on Saturday, flew down on a Friday. Saturday we spoke, but then Sunday morning, Tammy from the service came and picked us up at 7 in the morning to get us up to Roanoke to get on the plane to fly back to Detroit. I think the plane was supposed to leave at 10. This is where things went.
It went a little askew.
Askew, for sure.
And mind you, a good tip if you're planning on flying with a wheelchair is to measure your chair and to give the airline the specifications to make sure that your specific chair will fit on the airplane, that you're supposed to be flying on. And I gave the information of my chair, who has a name, Belle. That's my little travel chair. And I gave Belle's measurements and size. And then the day we show up at the airport on Sunday, and that's when we got the first indication that my chair may not fit on the airplane like it was supposed to.
And this was really weird because we know we flew with your smaller wheelchair. I mean, not the big complex rehabilitative technology chair that tilts in space.
Great babe.
So we took Belle. This is the thing that, and I have pictures, and we'll post that on our website when we write a blog about this. Truly, traveling with a wheelchair is all about a game of inches, because the reality is the chair, even with the seat folded down, was not too big to get into the hole that they have for the cargo.
It was too big to fit under the engine.
You know how they put like a conveyor belt sort of thing that goes up, that goes up from the ground to the cargo hole. The chair was too big to fit under the engine that hung over the conveyor belt.
Yes.
And they looked and they tried. And bless Delta, because they weren't going to force anything to try and get it on there, because they wanted to protect the chair.
Which is good, when you're flying. I think it's really important that the people that are handling your wheelchair understand that equipment is like, those are my virtual legs when we're on vacation. So you break it, it's like breaking both of my legs. And I don't think anybody would want that. And Delta understood that. And they were like, we're not going to force your chair. We don't want to break it. And so my chair did not make it onto the flight at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning like Dan and I had planned.
And this is where being kind, being patient, being everything with your airline, with the people who are serving you, because as the one thing that Delta, rightfully did was, they looked to see about getting another flight that day, because Jennifer and I, we realized that we could take the wheelchair apart. I wasn't comfortable with it because I don't know how to put it back together, and I was afraid of it traveling like that. And so Delta looked, and there were no other bigger planes going out that day.
Right.
That would accommodate Jennifer's chair, but they said that they would put us up in Roanoke that night and pay for the transportation to get us to the hotel from the airport. But we would have to wait till the next day to get on a bigger plane that would accommodate Jennifer's chair.
And so that, I don't hope for anyone to have that sort of experience. I hope that you measure the sides of your chair and your chair fits. But if it doesn't, I think it's really important that you have to be flexible. And I realize that can be hard. Dan lost a day of work because we were not able to make it home on Sunday. My caregiver lost a day of work because he wasn't able to care for me because I wasn't here. So that flexibility, that's pretty important. But instead of, looking at it like, oh, good heavens, it's the worst thing ever, we were thankful that we were safe. And especially now, with the hurricane making land imminently in the next day or two, we're thankful, we're appreciative that we're safe here in Michigan. And we're thinking of all our new friends in Virginia and hoping that they'll be safe. But in the grand scheme of things, if you can't make it home and you're safe and you can be flexible, hopefully, that's something. I don't want to sound like a Pollyanna, but would you say that that's pretty fair?
It's fair, and yeah, I lost a day of work. I wasn't able to get a hold of my boss directly, and I've only been at this job for like 7 weeks, and so I don't have my boss's home phone, but I emailed him and I left a message on his work voicemail. Obviously the comforting thing is that I didn't hear back from him, meaning that bless my new company for not wanting people to have to work on the weekends, and I
Right.
appreciate that. Long story short, or I'll keep talking, but he was very understanding because things happen. I mean, and that's we
We
just
were as prepared as we could be, and sometimes things are a little out of your control. We sent our measurements and we just didn't realize that. And when you do a lot of things like book a plane reservation and you give somebody your size and your measurements of your chair, maybe they can't conceptualize how the wheelchair has to go under an engine to get in the cargo. So things like that happen, and I think that Dan, bless Dan, that we were patient and we were flexible, and that really helped to make this trip memorable and a good thing.
And I think that's the thing. It's like, and this is something that, those of us living with MS or just people in general need to look at things in different perspectives. It's like it would have been very easy to be angry, upset, and like, I can't believe we got to stay here, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, count your blessings. And I mean, you would commented in one of our presentations is just like the living in the moment. And it's just like,
Yeah, be present.
we were not able to get home, but look at it in this way, that here we have a free night stay at a hotel in downtown Roanoke with, a meal voucher to go out to dinner. And it's like, what a blessing, what a great experience that we could take that time. And then all of a sudden we're able to like kind of regroup because we were in such a rush for the entire weekend. It was such an intense weekend. We were able to like breathe for a second and catch the energy for that which was in front of us on Monday, because that connecting flight was
We did not
a totally
have
different different
We
story.
did not have that 2 hours that we planned, but Delta wanted us to get home at a decent time, and so it was crazy fast connection. When we landed in Atlanta, it wasn't smart to take my wheelchair off the plane, so I was reliant on a Delta representative to escort me from my gate where we landed from Roanoke to the gate where we were taking off to go back to Detroit. And fortunately, we had a woman who booked it through Atlanta, and she got us there in time. But I would say all total we had maybe 20 minutes.
We had about 15 minutes, and I think that's where, the smartness, the foresight of the Delta representative in Roanoke who rebooked the flight encouraged us, as we had talked, like wanting to have Jennifer's wheelchair so during a layover we could go to the bathroom, etc. And she had encouraged us to just check everything through to Detroit,
Straight
because
through to
she said
Detroit.
there'd be no way that they'd be able to get the wheelchair back up into the airport to get us over and then recheck it to get on that. And it was intense, but that's just where, when you put your faith in strangers, because at one point you were sliding out of the wheelchair as we were booking it through. I think we had to go through like 4 different terminals to get to our airplane to Detroit. You started sliding. The woman who was pushing you wasn't strong enough to help, and I can't do it by myself. She calls this big guy, this muscular, huge beefcake kind of guy, and she's like,
in Atlanta.
and she just says, "Sir, can you help?" And he comes over, and he just shoved me out of the way, just waved me out. He says, "I got this," and he lifted Jennifer up, and that's where I think those of us with MS need to be open to getting that kind of help and just having people get up in our business
And
when they're helping.
you need to rely on the kindness of strangers. Unfortunately, this strong man in Atlanta, he was able to help, and he helped get me in my chair. And it took like about a second, and then here we go, booking it again to make our flight to Detroit. So all total, it was stressful, but it was a really good experience. And something I think both Dan and I feel comfortable to fly and take a connecting flight again. And you would ask what scares you, and I pretty comfortably can say that a connecting flight does not scare me anymore.
It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't scare me anymore. I mean, but the reality is when you're doing something like that, you can't take it lightly. You still need to, like we said, be prepared, be flexible, be patient, and be willing to take a risk. I mean, it's just like, because things could have gone bad, but you learn. I mean, we learned that not all airplanes are created equal and
No.
accommodating even Bell. So be willing to just take a chance like that. A well-educated,
And be prepared for it and plan and do your homework and then, hope and pray that everything will work out well. And as Dan always says, have faith in yourself that you can figure this out. And I constantly have lived by the mantra that count on the kindness of strangers. Sometimes because that's what you need to do. I'm forever appreciative of the Delta staff that trucked through the Atlanta airport and the gentleman that helped me. I'm always appreciative to my husband. Happy belated anniversary one more time.
happy belated anniversary, 13 years and 2-day anniversary
Yes.
to you, my lovely wife and wife.
Yeah, lovely wife and life.
And so anyway, what about everybody out there? What scares you, and how have you overcome your challenges, your fears in dealing with something that seems daunting because of your multiple sclerosis? Check in with us on our Facebook, Dan and Jennifer Digman, and on Twitter at DanJenDig, or on our website, danandjenniferdigman.com. And thanks again for listening, and check in with us soon. This has been Dan and Jennifer Digman on A Couple Takes on MS on the MS&Me Radio Network. And thanks as always to the Blue Draft Kid for composing the theme music for our show. Till next time, take care.